Hello everybody. Today is going to be a very interesting video on your rights with police on traffic stops. I'm going to go into great detail on traffic stops, and this is going to be based on my 30 years in law enforcement and everything I've learned. I'm going to talk about some case law. We're going to talk about reasonable suspicion versus probable cause, consent versus probable cause and inventory searches, including drug sniffs around cars, stop and frisk law, also known as Terry stops, and tips when dealing with bad officers for accountability reasons. If you're a law enforcement officer watching this video, I'm glad to have you. I think that we could all use a review on the laws, and we all know that training varies from department to department. But these videos, the video here is going to be based on case law here in Utah, okay? If you live outside of Utah, then maybe what I'm telling you doesn't apply, but I think it's very similar in most of the country. But just keep that in mind. This is Utah law. A lot of Utah case law is going to be in this video. And that's where I will be drawing this from, is case law. I'll just start out, and I'm going to say that a professional cop, when they stop you, absent a valid reason for not doing so, will tell you why they stopped you. Any officer that refuses to tell you why they stopped you, unless there's a legitimate reason, which I can't think of very many, that is signs of either a bad officer or an officer that has poor training. It's just more professional to let somebody know why you're being stopped. Police need either reasonable suspicion or probable cause to stop you in public. And we're talking about vehicles here. For example, if you're speeding or they suspect you of being impaired in a DUI or something like that. Reasonable suspicion means reasonable articulable facts of criminal activity, suspicions that would lead a reasonable officer to conclude that a person has either committed a crime, is attempting to commit a crime, or has committed a crime and they're trying to leave. Let me give you what reasonable suspicion, one example that I would commonly see in patrol. I get a call from the Costco, somebody working there, and they say that there's a male out there in the parking lot looking through different vehicles and pulling car door handles. And so I come out on that call and I see that person as described by the caller at the Costco, matching that description. That is reasonable suspicion based on my training and experience. Well, actually, for anybody for that matter, any reasonable person will conclude that they are probably doing vehicle burglaries. And that is reasonable suspicion, and that would be grounds in itself for an officer to stop that person and demand their name, their date of birth, and their actions. They have to identify. Now, let's say that I've done that, and this person plays stupid with me, like they don't know what's going on. I can have that other officer watch them, and I can even put handcuffs on them while I'm detaining them. And then I can go into the store and I can look at video and see if they actually did break into any vehicles while I have them detained. And let's say that I see them on video breaking into vehicles. Well, that is probable cause now, and that is grounds to arrest right there. Now, at this point, after they are under arrest, I can search their person completely before they go to jail. I can empty their pockets, I can search for weapons, I can empty the contents of those pockets out. Jails don't want contraband in there, and that's what they're going to do. And the jail is actually going to do a further search than an officer on the street would. The jail is going to probably have them remove their shoes, taking their belts off. They're going to have them take their socks off and turn them inside out. If you've ever been booked in jail, you know that. I used to work in the jail, and they're very thorough in what they do. So when people are stopped in public, whether that's reasonable suspicion or it's probable cause, that stop may not go longer than what is necessary to address the original stop. For example, if I stop somebody for speeding, I have enough time, I'm allowed to ask for your driver's license, your registration card, and your insurance card. And then I can go back to my police vehicle and I can do a warrants check, a driver's license check to see if it's valid or not, a registration check of the vehicle. And then I have time that's allotted for me to write my citation and then go up to the car and have you sign it and explain when you're supposed to appear in court and all that stuff. And then I shall release you without further delay. So you're free to go after that. However, the only exception to that would be if that stop was extended, and that's called like maybe an investigative stop, to where it would justify me keeping you there longer. For example, if I'm writing that citation and I'm giving it to you, and then let's assume that marijuana is illegal in this particular state. And then while I'm talking to them, I smell odor that my training and experience tells me is marijuana. Okay, so now that that traffic stop is over with, now I can extend my stop to a drug investigation, and that's probable cause. And I won't need a warrant to search that vehicle. The courts have held widely that vehicles are an exception to the Fourth Amendment and a warrant is not needed. And so I can search the vehicle for that odor of marijuana, where that odor leads me. And if I find that marijuana in the car, then I can seize that, and that is a lawful seizure. However, the courts have also said that let's say that I find a bag of cocaine in the car when I am looking for marijuana, and I seize that cocaine. That's probably going to be an illegal search, and that cocaine can be suppressed. You would get a hold of a lawyer, obviously, and they could file a motion to suppress that evidence because that was not the scope of the search. So when they're doing that, that scope is limited to what their probable cause is. You don't have to answer questions or consent to searches. Even if you're innocent and you say, well, I'm innocent, I haven't done anything wrong, I have nothing to hide, it's still not necessary. Unless you just want to sit there and BS with the officer and be late for work or something, and those are your rights. So one thing on traffic stops is a common misunderstanding for people. In Utah, the courts are very lenient with this. Officers can ask the occupants, ask and then tell occupants and the driver of the car to exit the vehicle during that lawful stop. Now, this does not give them a full-blown right to do searches of your car and searches of your person. They're not allowed to do that unless they have if they reasonably believe that you are armed and dangerous. That's the only way they can do that. Unless they get your clear and voluntary consent to search. Terry versus Ohio governs right to search cars and person. Number one, officer has to have a reasonable belief the suspect is armed and dangerous. For example, the officer notices a bulge in their waistband in a place where weapons are commonly hidden. And let's say the officer has personal knowledge that that person has a violent history. Okay. And they can pat down into those areas on that Terry stop where weapons can be hidden. And they're looking for hard items, not soft items, hard items like a knife or a gun or something like that. If the officer comes across something that's soft in the pocket, they could seize that, but it would be very limited circumstance. That officer would have to believe through that officer's training and experience that that item is contraband or something like that. They're not allowed to manipulate the item and, sit there and squeeze it and, they're not allowed to do that. But if they immediately can tell based on that training and experience that that is a cocaine rock and foil or something like that, then they can do that, and that's legal. Drug sniffing dogs. Let's talk about them. The Utah court has ruled contraband is not protected under the Fourth Amendment, and because dogs only alert officers to such, it's not a violation of a Fourth Amendment to run a dog around a car and do a sniff. However, running that drug dog around the car has to be done within that traffic stop timed. If that officer, let's say that was the traffic stop, and let's say that a traffic stop should, take 15 minutes is reasonable, that dog would need to be out there while that officer was handling that stop, writing the citation and doing those checks and doing those other things. If they were completed with their stop and then they detained you for a longer period while they were waiting for that canine dog to get there, that would be a violation of your Fourth Amendment, and you could probably have that thrown out because that was an unreasonable delay on that search. Let's talk about consent searches. If officers ask you to search their car, for example, that's probably a good clue that they don't have probable cause and they can't do it without consent. Also, a lot of people don't understand how consent works. In fact, almost everybody I've ever dealt with, they don't know what their rights are. Consent must be freely and voluntarily given. And it's a reasonable standard. Would a reasonable person in your shoes understand your rights, what you were consenting to? It also has to be given without coercion. And it's the state's burden or the prosecutor's burden to prove that consent was freely and voluntarily given. What are some factors to determine whether consent was freely given or consensual? Number one, objecting to the search. If you objected, that would obviously show that it was not consensual. Again, that reasonable person standard, or if the officer did not state the reason for the search, those are indicators that you probably have a problem with this consent search, and you would get an attorney to help you out on that. Probable cause searches in vehicles are okay without a warrant. I believe I mentioned that earlier. Plain view doctrine, let's talk about that. Plain view doctrine is how a lot of officers do drug busts in vehicles. If the officer has you stopped for a lawful reason in a vehicle, and they are standing in a place they have a legal right to stand. For example, they are talking to you through the window on the traffic stop, and they see this white powdery substance in the ashtray that through their training and experience tells them that is a cocaine. They can seize that car, or they can seize the drugs that are in that ashtray, and Utah law is pretty broad on vehicle search. Once they've done that, they can search other areas for other drugs as well. Inventory vehicle searches. A lot of times when police make an arrest, they do an inventory search of the vehicle. Officers should follow department policy when they're searching vehicles, and the spirit of this procedure is to find property in the car that's being left there when it goes to the tow yard for liability reasons. So if there are value items that are left in the car, that is the purpose of that should be the spirit of the inventory search. And it's not, tearing car door panels out looking for drugs. That would go beyond the scope of an inventory search of a vehicle. Now, let me just give you some tips on dealing with officers on traffic stops. Number one, be nice and be respectful. Even if they're being a jackass, be nice. And never, ever put your hands in your pocket when you're nervous. Don't reach for things in the car while you're talking to them. Have them on the steering wheel. And if you can remember, roll down your windows in your car. Turn the car off. If it's dark, turn on the dome lights inside. And just sit there and wait for them to come up and talk to you. There's no duty to inform officers in Utah that you're carrying if you're armed. However, I recommend that you do so because that is a positive thing. Every officer that I've talked to speaks favorably and positively of people that they contact when they have a concealed weapon permit. In Utah, we have constitutional carry, and so, they're getting people that don't have licenses because they don't need it. But if you have a permit, that speaks to the person's character, that you went out and you took some training that you weren't required to do, and you shows that you wanted to be responsible and have a license to do so. Of course, that's a personal decision which you do, but that is your decision. And I'm just telling you that was the opinion of a Utah Highway Patrol trooper that I talked to just recently. Let me just give you some last tips for misconduct from officers. Always be respectful, even if they are not. It will go a long way. All you're going to do in creating a scene and being a jackass is the officer is just probably going to spend more time and put more details into that police report or those citation notes of what a jackass you were. And that's just going to hurt you when it goes to court. If you're quiet, you don't say anything, then you're not raising attention to yourself, and you can see for obvious reasons why that would benefit you, other than the main benefit would be it's just nice to be respectful to not just officers, but everybody. It's called being kind. This is something I would recommend you do. If you've got a problem officer, there's nothing wrong with respectfully asking for a sergeant or supervisor to respond to the scene. That would be ideal because you can get that complaint filed right there, right when it happened. The supervisor can call out that officer right there, and that would be the best way to do it, but they don't have to. They can say, no, I'm not doing it, or they're too busy, or whatever excuse they want to do. But that was something that I always did as a cop. If somebody wanted to complain about me and they asked me for my badge number, I said, here, I'll make the phone call for you. Let me call my sergeant out here and you can talk to him right now. You know what they did mostly? Oh, never mind. No, I want to get him out here now. I want him to hear what you have to say. So if you're a police officer out there, somebody wants your badge number, be respectful to them and offer to make the phone call for them. If they're legitimately have a complaint, let them file it. And it's going to be better for everybody to handle it right there. If they won't or they can't get a supervisor out there, the next best thing would be, as soon as you get home, I would write an email to the police chief, okay? Not a supervisor. I would go straight to the top and I would write an email to the police chief detailing what the bad behavior is, what you believe they did wrong. And if it's a training issue with the officers, which I think usually that's what it is, cops are like my family. Whether you like them or not, they're like family to me, okay? Problem we have today with all the defund the police movement is we got these young'uns training young ones, and all the good old farts have retired because they're sick of the BS. And you just have these young generation that are doing the best they can if it's a training issue. I'm not going to say there are not corrupt cops out there, because there are. I'm not going to I'd be lying to you telling you that there were not corrupt cops, but I don't think that there's that many in number. And the majority of them are very good people just trying to make a living. So you can believe that or not. I'm sure I'll get all the naysayers on the comments, but that's just what I've seen from where I work. Maybe it's different where you work, but where I was, it's usually a training issue. But yes, there are bad ones out there that do things deliberately. And they know right from wrong, but they just do it anyway. Maybe they want that bust, or they don't like you, or something like that, and that's wrong. They shouldn't be violating rights. There's just no excuse for it. And I've seen it in law enforcement. Whenever I have, I've reported it. And I will admit, sometimes they just don't do shit about it. And they keep these officers on. I could write a book on it. Documentation is really important when you're filing police reports, okay? Even if your complaint goes nowhere, or if it's a more of a less serious or less obvious problem, where there's smoke, there's fire, okay? Maybe that one complaint is not going to do anything, but if that officer gets numerous complaints, that's going to be a good indicator that, you know what, maybe that wasn't an isolated incident and there's a problem. So, what's wrong with filing the complaints? And I would also, when you're filing your complaint, ask nicely, ask respectfully if they will contact you on a disposition with the officer with what they did. If this was a training issue, you know, I'd like to hear that they're going to, for next training year, the department is going to do some training with the whole department on that issue. If they're doing unlawful searches and seizures, then maybe they promise you that they're going to address that in training. If they did that, I'd be happy with that. The chances of you suing a department and getting money are very slim. It's not easy to sue a department unless it's something that's very egregious, something that's very wrong, that they blatantly did, that was a violation of your civil rights. Then you've got a chance to get money. But we should want these departments to improve when it's a training issue. Anyway, I hope this video was helpful. Thanks for watching.